Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. It's really cool. So we connected at Sobermac Summit. How was that for you, by the way?
Silverback was an amazing summit, right? This was my first time there. I'd known of Allie through a friend of mine, Sam Miller, and followed her for a little bit, but had never really stepped into her world, right? And I know she's done a great job at building this up over the last few years, right? Started with, 30, 40 people, and now you're over 200, and they're going to expect to be close to 500 next year. But for me, what was just fantastic was just the community, right? I think it was really just everybody was dialed into their specific area, but just so warm, right? Welcoming, open to discussions, want to learn, right? So I think the community was fabulous. So she's done a fantastic job, and I look forward to it. This is just, this was the first of many, for sure.
That's the biggest thing I took away from it. I was impressed by how well the first go around went. I mean, I've been to a number of first time events by people who are trying something out. Usually they're like a shit show. Usually it's not good. It's like, well, let's hope the next time goes better. But it was thoroughly impressive how well it went for the first go around. So yeah, like you, I look forward to the next one. I think she's going to do very well with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to give the microphone over at the beginning of each episode to the guest. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you found your way into the world of testosterone replacement,
Sure.
where it's a very fascinating subject. It seems like everybody today is talking about it. I know there's a lot of misinformation about that, which we can get to, but how did you find your way into this world?
Sure. No, very, interesting story, right? I come from an investment background. I've been doing testosterone and Marius for almost 10 years now, but it really just came across our desk at the time because this was around the time the FDA changed the labels around testosterone, and there was a lot of noise around cardiovascular risk, right? People said, okay, there are a lot of lawsuits, right? People were taking androgel and they said, look, these are causing heart attacks, and a lot of the noise around this, right? Similar to women's hormones back in 2002. So
Pull the mic a little closer, but just a little closer to your face. Yeah. Go ahead.
Gotcha. So this was kind of similar to female hormones back in 2002 when WHI caused a huge ruckus around hormones. Millions of women got off of it. So similar, fast forward, 12 years, and the same thing is happening to testosterone and men on testosterone. So, we're based in Raleigh, North Carolina. There was actually a oral testosterone drug being developed there locally. We were familiar with the group doing it. And I think at that time, people questioned, okay, is this a viable business going forward because of all this commotion around testosterone? So we looked at it, got really interested. I said, everything I'm reading is saying testosterone is really good. And if it was discovered today, probably would be the most valuable molecule on the planet because of all the things that it affects, right? This is not just a muscle building phenomenon, right? This is cognition. This is cardiovascular health, sleep, bone health.
There's also such a need for it if it had been discovered today, because we have a real depletion of it today, specifically.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a bigger problem than ever. It's actually interesting. We're going to put out this graph shortly, but it looks at the rise of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and testosterone deficiency together. And if you look at those rates, obviously they're going, up and to the right, no doubt, and they're all problems. But testosterone deficiency is actually tracking above all of those.
Holy, wow.
Yeah.
Above obesity? Really? That is interesting. I did not know that. I knew it was rising. I didn't know it was outperforming.
I was surprised by the data. My team shared it with me, and I was actually shocked.
So the obvious question then has to be asked, why do you think that is?
So I think it's a combination of things. It is again, similar things that are driving those others, right? There's a lot of lifestyle, processed food and diet is obviously talked about, quite significantly today, and that's part of it. We have these environmental toxins that are in, our water and everything else, right? Every human tested on the planet will have these levels of microplastics in them, right? So I think you have environmental, you have food diet, you have a sedentary lifestyle, people are sitting in front of their computers. So you have this vortex, right? And then you talk about sleep too, things like this. Sleep is when our hormones are produced. Our sleep has been hijacked, honestly, right, by our devices and work and the demands of the modern life. So all of these things have collided, and I think there's this explosion in this deficiency now, and it's getting worse. So you have to really find ways. Obviously, testosterone replacement in some sense is part of the solution in trying to help, but there are a multitude of factors that need to be addressed here to
Amen.
get things on track for sure.
And that's an important subject to discuss because I mean I'm somebody I take TRT and I have for the last 2.5 to 3.5 years. But when someone comes to me and asks if they should go on it, which is a question we all love getting on the internet,
Sure.
the answer I give in a nutshell is maybe because like you just pointed out, there's a number of other significant indicators as to where your levels might be dropping from. You know, how is your sleep? How is your diet? Are you exposing yourself to sunlight? How regularly are you drinking water, exercising, and exerting yourself? Like, how well do you do in adverse temperatures? Do you do contrast therapy? There's a lot of stuff that you should ask yourself before just jumping on something like that. And I mean, I am an example of somebody who would have checked most of those performance indicators who was still pulling lower levels than I wanted. I was somewhere in the 4 to 500s when I first jumped on TRT,
Mhm.
which is not acceptable for somebody in their, at the time, late 20s who was this active for this long, who had decades of activity level. And I am a testament to the environmental factors, I believe. I believe that me personally, my levels were affected by the environment I grew up in, the food, even the healthy food that I ate.
Right.
I ate it in America and I breathed American air and I drank American water. And I am a testament to the fact that while there are a lot of performance indicators that somebody should address before getting on, there's also environmental factors that cannot be ignored.
You can, yeah, it cannot be ignored, but and also out of your control too, right? I think it's important. Like, not everything is everyone's fault in that sense, right? So, like you're saying, the water or the air, like these things, you're going to be subjected to them. I mean, I had this conversation recently with my wife. She's like, "Should we just move? Like, we have to leave the country." That's not going to happen. To try and get rid of these things and fix the food system, some of these things are they're just buried in what's there.
Not unless you're the carnivore MD.
Yeah.
Then you can move.
Yeah, you have to focus on what you can control, right? And I think part of this is also being aware, working on those items, but a lot goes to testing too, right? Like
Mhm.
testosterone as a metabolic hormone should be on every blood panel. Why are we not testing this at a much earlier stage to understand, okay, what is potential implications here? What is the trajectory going to look like? Should I track this over time and see what's happening? We're missing an easy win right there, right? Because it's not expensive either. This testosterone test is
No.
like $10 on a blood panel. So why would we not? And again, it's a struggle to get. You go into your primary care provider today, especially if you're a young person. Forget about it if you're a younger person. You say, I want to test this. They're just floored. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you
Why? Why do you want to test your testosterone?
you're doing
You're
something wrong?
16,
Exactly.
which is very, very sad and incorrect because I mean, I personally, I didn't have a blood test done on me, period, until I was probably 17 or 18.
Right.
Like, really. And the only reason I had that was because we had a family friend who happened to be a naturopath. This is back in the like the dog days of blood testing and naturopath. Like this was not a popular thing to do. I remember when we did he even said, he's like, why are we testing his like why are we doing this? It
Mine
was
must be
weird.
way later. I don't even think it was that early, right? And again, even to this day, I think it's the stat is like under 40, maybe 60% of guys don't have a primary care provider, right? So they're not going in for any testing. And either they're just don't know, don't realize it, or they don't want to know,
Yeah.
right? That's
That's a
also a
big one. And that sucks because ignorance is not bliss. You do not want to just because I think a lot of people know in their heart of hearts that they're living in a way that is not conducive to their health. And they don't want to face the reality of, okay, well, if I really find out what's going on under the hood,
and can make changes.
I'm going to have to face him and he's going to tell me the things I can't do anymore.
Yeah. It's a hard pill to swallow for sure.
Mhm.
But I think again, it goes to mindset, right? And that goes to mental and things like that, that you really, it's just, you have to find your reason. Everybody has a different reason for it. And that's personal to each person, but you got to find your reason for making those shifts because it's got to be worth it for you.
Yeah, yeah. Getting back to the specific compound testosterone, because it seems like you touched on something that I want to address, and that's that there's a misunderstanding about the compound itself because the bodybuilding community sort of hijacked it in the 90s or even before that, the 80s, the 70s, and the 90s. And it seems like the average individual, when they hear the word even like, "Hey, have you considered going on testosterone?" They immediately flip a switch and they're like, "No, I would never do steroids. I don't do that." That's literally the answer some people will give with a straight face. What is How can we change that? How can we change the understanding of what testosterone is, and what is your definition of it, what it is and what its uses can be?
Sure. So I think you're absolutely right. It actually goes back to the 80s, Olympics, Ben Johnson, Canadian sprinter won, beat the American, and they thought it was testosterone. Congress came in, banned this thing, right? Headlines everywhere. So, it has been hijacked and stigmatized because then people think, okay, I'm taking a steroid. This is just for muscle and like performance enhancing, but that's not the case. So I think what we are out there to do is really educate on the fact that testosterone is a crucial metabolic hormone. Think about vitamin D, right? Vitamin D, nobody talked about it 30 years ago. And now everybody realizes vitamin D is a very crucial, and it's a hormone. It's not a vitamin, it's a hormone, right? Crucial hormone throughout the body. Very regular for doctors to test it and treat it. So testosterone,
And for people to be low and deficient in it.
yeah, the rates are staggering, right? For vitamin D deficiency.
And is that simply because of a lack of exposure to the sun? In your opinion, we're inside.
I
I'm guilty of this
yeah,
too, man.
some days I don't get out. Some
yeah,
days I don't get
don't
out.
get out in the sun.
So yeah, again, but we don't think twice about that's kind of you're like, okay, that's our lifestyle. Let's supplement it to make sure we're okay. Yes, should we go out a little bit more? Yeah, but we can't change our jobs, right? So
Yeah.
so you kind of just roll with that and make the modifications. So testosterone is a metabolic hormone, right? It's not just something that is used for muscle growth. It is vital. There's an androgen receptor on every organ in the body. So, and it works at a cellular level, right? So you have testosterone floating through your body, but it's got to bind to a cell to work, right? So this is really at the core of your body's functioning. I mean, testosterone and hormones are the ultimate signalers in the body. Um, so I think it really requires education. So that's for us, we think the way that you can destigmatize this is go out there, have enough people really talking and bringing to light all the important areas that it affects. So again, whether it is cognition, whether it's your cardiovascular health, whether it's your insulin sensitivity, right? We have a huge type 2 diabetes problem or diabetes problem in this country. Costs, I think the annual impact is around $400 billion. Huge, right?
It's huge.
And I think 320 is direct costs, 80 billion is indirect, like productivity and things like that.
Yeah.
So like insulin sensitivity, if your insulin, your fasting insulin can go down and you could be more prone to using your insulin better, why would we not look at these as early interventions,
Mhm.
right? So
And you're already not, you don't have a problem taking supplements because you're having to inject insulin every single day.
exactly.
Like you don't have some weird issue with it. Why wouldn't you also look at your testosterone levels and
And
see
that's
if
the
there's
interesting bit. I mean, actually endocrinologists are not as active with testosterone as they should be because they're already, if you look at the incident rate for, say, a type 2 diabetic, so, digressing a bit here, but it's already 40% chance that that type 2 diabetic is testosterone deficient as well.
40%?
Yeah, so it's very likely,
Yeah.
right, that this person has that. So, the endocrinologist can be looking at these and treating them in combination rather than putting one to the side and only focusing on insulin, right?
And correct me, forgive me of my ignorance on this question because I really truly don't know. But taking insulin will not reverse type 2 diabetes. Taking a testosterone supplement might actually help reverse your
Yep.
type 2 diabetes over time. Is that a correct statement?
Absolutely. So it was a great study. It was done it was actually done in Australia, but 1,000 patients. This came out around 2020. And it looked at testosterone therapy in pre-diabetics and type 2 diabetics. Almost no pre-diabetics continued on to type 2 diabetes under TRT. And it was a significant number of the type 2 diabetes reversed and basically got their A1Cs, or they used the oral glucose tolerance test to measure and again, would not be classified as diabetics anymore. And that was just under TRT.
And this is where sometimes I think you can get the conversation can turn a little nefarious and you can start asking the bigger question like why? Why is it that testosterone has been so vilified? Just using this example alone, why is insulin so readily prescribed to diabetics and yet testosterone levels are not even tested? They're not addressed. 40% of them have this problem. They're not talking, well, there's a lot of money to be made if you keep this person exactly where they are and keep shoving insulin into their gut, but it's not as much money to be made if you fix the problem at a root cause. through TRT, they no longer have the need for the insulin, and they can just do TRT for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. So I think, again, obviously we're in this space. Some would consider us a pharmaceutical company. I don't actually consider us that, right? We are, we are trying to provide a solution that helps across the board in that sense. And look, I think some of these things, there's a virtuous cycle. If you can fix your testosterone levels, become more active, maybe you reduce your need for insulin, or you're not type 2 diabetic anymore. Great. Like, we want to encourage that behavior, right? I don't want, actually, if that person doesn't have to be on testosterone, then fine. That's okay.
Oh, yeah.
We just, again, I think there's a real strong case to look at all the causes, treat what you can, and then look at some of the other remedies and holistically help, right? Like, we're actually interested in holistic healthcare. And that's actually why we're so excited. In some sense, I think the new administration is going to be looking at this
Oh, yeah.
in a big way.
Oh, yeah.
So
Everybody's ranting and raving about the tweet, the RFK tweet, where
Yeah.
he mentioned TRT, he mentioned stem cells, he mentioned hyperbaric treatment,
peptides, right?
and I think red light, something like that.
Exactly.
And every Ben Greenfield biohacker or person in this industry was like, this is amazing. Finally, somebody at the top down level is actually talking about this stuff.
Right.
Because it's been weird and somewhat frustrating to be kind of pigeonholed into this weird place where it's like, no, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical provider, I don't have any of the proper, but I know this works and I know what you're doing isn't. And now everyone is starting to know, and yet nothing's changing.
But that's why I think the education through platforms like this is so important, right? Because people are really committed to try and understand what's going on. They want to get to this root cause. They're looking and searching for help, right? So, I mean, look at, again, using testosterone at testosterone clinics or wellness concierge clinics, right? Why have they popped up everywhere? And even online, right? Direct to patients. They granted, fine, some is marketing, but patients wouldn't be continuing to use all of these services and seek them out if our healthcare system was working.
Right. And if the TRT that they were receiving wasn't doing something, because it isn't like cheap what we're talking
Yeah.
about. It's you're paying for this.
Right.
But what in the world else could you possibly want to invest in? Like, what is better than being a healthy, balanced, hormonally optimized person that lives the best life you can? Like, what in the world would you rather spend your money on?
I think once someone understands, right, how good they can feel and the difference, and then they don't go back, right? So again, it goes back to education and helping. I think the beauty with testosterone is not just, okay, the metabolic effects and how we really get people to understand why this is so important for your health. But then again, symptomatically, you're also helping them. So they see results near term too, right? Whether that's, whether they do have the ability to, burn fat and put on muscle, or they have libido benefits, right? And then it becomes a couples thing. Whatever they might be, they see these results near term. And that's extremely encouraging to continue therapy. And I think, again, not a lot of things can do this. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. You just mentioned something perfect segue to my next question. A lot of times the libido issue, you mentioned couples, and I think there's a big misunderstanding with regards to testosterone and women's health. Women need testosterone just like men. And a lot of times I think there's a problem that arises when a husband will go on TRT, the wife will not. There's now competing sexual urges, one that's elevated and one that is not. How do you guys account for that?
Right. So, yeah, I think a couple things, right? We absolutely do believe that testosterone is a female hormone too. It is not just belief. The science is there. The data is there. So this is a burgeoning area, if you will, right? I think women's hormones are coming back finally after 20 years of being decimated because of that study. But testosterone is now also part of that equation, which is becoming better and better known. Again, they have to be educated, right?
They have a fear in the case of women and testosterone specifically. They have a fear. Okay, I'm gonna get an Adam's apple. I'm gonna get hair on my issue. I'm gonna get voice.
None of this happens at large, right? And again, it's always important that you're doing, adequate therapy, right? Super physiological levels at large are not meant for anybody. We want to look at what is adequate and normal for you, right? And how do you respond? So that's why you're able to titrate doses to what it fits. But no, I think the female side it's an area that we're going to research as a company. We are working with a lot of KOLs in this space that also are treating females currently.
KOLs.
Key opinion leaders, right? So there's a lot of like leading urologists, a lot of female urologists that have been very vocal around this. Testosterone Project, which we'll get into, one of the key objectives of that is a female testosterone, an FDA approved female testosterone. Because yeah, what you're saying again to this couple, you have this balancing act, right? So it's great actually when a lot of these couples will go to the doctor together, and sometimes the doctor can actually address both at the same time because the spouse is listening or the partner is listening, saying, "Hey, look, what about me?"
Mhm.
And then they're able to tackle both of them at the same time.
Right.
But I think it will do wonders, honestly, for um, relationships at
Of
large.
course.
And it's become, again, it's stigmatized now. We're seeing that break down a little bit, but I think if we're successful and society at large can do this, think about what that means for society, for folks that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. Um,
Oh, even younger.
yeah.
30s, their 40s. You're seeing something that is very unique to 2024, and that is that my generation and the generations beneath me are coming in with levels of testosterone that are depleted lower than their grandparents. I mean, and I mean that literally.
Mhm.
I've had, I mean, we have a team member when he got his stuff, he was in his, I believe, early 20s, maybe 21 or so when he first got tested, and he was below 400.
Mhm.
His dad, like in his, he told me that he's like, yeah, my dad got tested. My dad was like twice. It was like 8.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. There's something, and it's again, it's getting back to the factors we talked about at the beginning of this that are we're growing up in that and our parents didn't. Our grandparents and our parents did not have the same water, food, and air. All the environmental factors did not hit them that early in life during early childhood development. I think that as we grow, as my generation, our generation, and the generations beneath us grow, we're realizing that it's much earlier. The
Mhm.
problems occurring in the 20s, in the
Sure.
even probably even teenagers are lower than they have been in past times.
I agree, and we are seeing it too. Like you mentioned, a teammate, so we've seen the same thing, and it is a little frightening, right? Because again, even they're so much earlier on the spectrum, so they're having to advocate and find these solutions themselves because they're not being guided, right? So again, platforms like this are really important to help go out there and talk about it. I think what's interesting now is we look at this shift to a younger population and just more broadly, if we look at folks that are thinking about, okay, I understand how this is important. This is, let me go find out. Maybe I get tested. What's the solution, right? So I think what we're seeing now is, with oral testosterone actually being a viable option for the first time ever for patients. And I think this includes people from young in the spectrum all the way to older, is this mimicking of the natural circadian rhythm, right? So our bodies produce hormones on a daily basis. They sort of flush out by the end of the day. We regenerate at night, right? That's why a good night sleep is so important, is so you get to those stages and you can actually produce the hormones that your body needs for the following day. But what we're seeing is that the ability of to to take, say, testosterone on a daily basis and mimic this rhythm, you're able to keep more parameters intact than you would potentially on other therapies that are more long acting. Particularly like things like LH and FSH, right? These shut down on injections. They're undetectable levels when you're on an injection therapy at large. So on oral therapy, what we see is that these drop, but they stay at the lower end of normal range. So that means your production to a certain degree is staying on.
Mm.
And I think that's incredibly encouraging for definitely younger folks, but we're seeing it resonate with older folks as
Mm.
well, too, because even though you may be on this for life chronically,
Mhm.
most people don't want to shut down their natural production or shut down
No.
their system completely
A
because
am I understanding this correctly? The indication is that injectable testosterone will shut down your natural production of testosterone when taken?
pretty much.
That's
I mean,
okay.
if you're injecting on a weekly basis,
Mhm.
some people have protocols that will take them to a few times a week, but at large, I'd say 90% of folks that are using injectable testosterone, their LH and FSH is undetectable.
Okay. And so the oral testosterone that you guys have come around to is not doing that. It's not
Not
showing.
doing that.
So your natural testosterone stays stable, and yet you can supplement it.
Intact to a certain degree.
Okay.
Exactly. So you can't, it's hard to tease out exactly what's coming from, your natural production, what's coming from your therapeutic, addition in that sense.
Mhm.
But those markers, which actually have led us to go and explore a fertility study. So we're running a small pilot study to look at sperm counts in younger men.
Because that is the biggest pushback to TRT, I think. Honestly, if there was one subject that everybody complains about, or not complains about, they have concern regarding taking testosterone, is their fertility. They are concerned that, hey, if I want to have kids, am I going to be able to have kids later? Am I able to have kids on this? Is this a form of male birth control if I'm taking this? Meaning I'm basically, you know,
Right.
unable to get somebody pregnant. Where does that land?
And the funny thing I'll preface that with is that testosterone deficiency is also implicated in male infertility,
Uh-huh.
right? So if you're, a lot of these younger guys, and fertility is a huge issue across the country right now, right? So if you're one of these younger guys with low testosterone, the chances that you're infertile already are high
Yeah.
and higher
Yeah.
because of that. So, so it, replacing it is not doing the negative always in that sense. You may already be in that position. But again, it's a big concern. So I think raising levels, again, this is what the studies will go out there and show, right? What is happening to those sperm counts? And then ultimately what's happening to that fertility. I think you may have better chances to have a pregnancy on adequate levels.
On adequate levels
Yeah.
of testosterone.
And again,
So there's an argument that it actually will raise your fertility if you're on the right amount of testosterone.
there's probably a sweet spot, and it's going to be, I don't want anybody to take away that, hey, I'm advocating like this is going to make you,
Yeah.
fertile in that sense, right? But there's probably a sweet spot that makes this work.
Okay. Okay. Now, the absorption rate of oral testosterone in relation to injection, because that's always been, I think, the competition between the two. And my understanding for most of my time, because I've always done injection. That's always been I do it twice a week, one on Monday, one on Friday. I divide the regimen in half. The absorption rate, as I understood it, was that injections were better and that oral took time. You had to digest it. It has to obviously go through the liver, everything like that.
Right.
Am I wrong?
So a lot of older notions there, right? So let's start at the liver, right? So next generation oral testosterone, what we've developed and in market today, I'll just say Kaisertrex is not liver toxic. So
Okay,
it is
good.
lymphatically absorbed. That means your small intestine, right? So it bypasses the liver and it's absorbed in your small intestine.
Wow.
That's one of the ones that you're combating constantly, right? Liver toxic, liver toxic. Even the medical community doesn't fully know this or appreciate it yet, right? It's a matter of education. So that's a huge checkbox. Don't have to worry about.
That is a huge checkbox.
Huge.
To be able to take, because you now no longer have to inject, you can take oral and you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Because you're right, liver toxicity is one of the biggest concerns with any
Any medication. Yeah,
medication.
there is a lot, right? That's typically downfalls of board.
Advil.
Yeah.
I mean, anything like that. You're worried about your liver long term.
Exactly. Actually, some early studies of testosterone on decanoate, which is the same active, show beneficial effects to the liver, like in NALFLD, fatty
Oh.
liver disease. So I think, just as you're seeing GLP-1s used for a lot of these different things, I think you can see testosterone in the same way. And again, happy to talk about research that we're doing or going to do. But again, so in terms of absorption, it is a daily action, right? So it will get absorbed. You'll have peak levels sometime in that 3 to 5 hour range. So you're rising up relatively quickly and reaching peaks. Now, Kaisertrex formulation specifically is developed with something called phytosterols, phytosterol esters. So historically, these have been used in as a lipid lowering use, right? Actually, Cheerios, Heart Healthy, that claim is made because they dump phytosterols on the fruit.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but we use it as a solubilizer and help with absorption. So you get that peak within 3 to 5 hours, and then obviously, yes, it's going to come back down. But that's why this is also a BID medication. You're taking it twice a day.
Yeah. As opposed to injections, which have probably 10 to 12-hour half-life where they survive in your body after you inject.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes longer, right? Even some of them go.
Which is why if you are taking injections, I think the proper regimen would be maybe even three times a week, 3 times a week, divided up throughout the week. That's going to give you your best yield. But
Absolutely.
some people are not really all that fond of sticking needles in themselves over and over and over
I think
again.
that's the ask, right? When we think about, okay, how do we benefit, society's health at large, right? How can you have the most amount of people need something actually stick with it and do it, right? Sometimes, doctors say the best medication for you is the one that you're actually going to take. And I think similar theory applies here.
Oh, yeah.
So how do we get, the right amount of people that need this to be taking it?
Yeah.
And I think oral changes that paradigm.
I think there's
for
people
sure.
who are almost embarrassed to admit that the reason they won't do TRT is because they're afraid of needles.
Yeah.
They don't want to do that.
The adherence rate, actually, if you look at injections over a 12-month period, again, granted, you can tease out certain types of populations, it's only like 8%. Of people that start an injection, say January 1st, will be on TRT at the end of the year.
8%?
Yeah, super low.
Wow. So I'm in the 8%. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
You're right. That is incredibly low. Yeah. I mean, something prescribed but not taken means nothing. And so if they won't do it, what in the world is the point?
There's some other things that still, I go back to how our body makes this every day, right? And by mimicking that physiological regimen, you get some benefits. So again, you see on injections, often folks, if you're doing it in shorter intervals, you can avoid it. But if not, you might see higher hematocrit levels, right? This is something that people are somewhat concerned about. Again, question a lot why their other medical provider might take them off TRT because they'll say, okay, your hematocrit is getting too high.
So what does that mean? Their hematocrit?
Your blood cells.
You're ready. So, which is why a lot of them say, okay, you need to go donate blood.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So that
Is that feasible? Is that a reasonable request? If my primary care is giving me TRT and she says, okay, it would be a good idea for you to go donate blood.
it's a reasonable request, but I think it depends on how often, right? And what does that do for your sort of compliance, right? And then again, related to how often, are you suffering any sort of related downsides like losing too much iron in your blood and then having to supplement and making sure those levels are okay, right? So there are some downsides from having to donate too frequently. But again, high hematocrit is an issue in almost some of the studies actually point to almost a 60% incidence rate with injection therapy.
60%
of patients.
And what's an incident? So heart attack?
No, not an incident, like in sort of breaching what they deem as a normal level, which is a 54 hematocrit is where usually that cutoff is. So again, this is mainly urology studies. They'll say, okay, around 60% eclipse that number versus in oral therapy, this is sub 2%.
Oh, wow.
So I think
Why is it so much better?
because you're not going to super physiological levels, right? Like I think, what's an analogy, right? Like an injection is effectively ringing that bell nonstop, right? Versus orals ringing that bell when it needs to during the day, and then you're getting a rest. Your body is taking a break from that testosterone because it doesn't need to be oversaturated, right? At night, physiologically, if we had normal testosterone levels, we wouldn't be at peak levels when we're sleeping. Right. So you don't need
You'd
to
be at peak levels right when you wake up. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right when you wake up.
Exactly.
So when is the best time to take oral testosterone?
So you take it in the morning. And then, you often take it sometime in the afternoon at lunch. Some folks take it in the evening, but usually you're kind of, spacing them around 6 hours apart.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, very fascinating. What does this do for the market of injectable testosterone? Would you say get rid of it entirely? I mean, is it optimal over oral testosterone in any way, or is it simply inferior and soon to be outdated?
Good question. I think there are different folks that this is going to fit for. Again, you have a population of some folks that have been on injectable therapy and have been on, what would be deemed super physiological doses. Although maybe, again, their biomarkers look good and they're safe and whatnot. They may not be the best patients to transition to an oral therapy just because they're used to these super physiological levels. And over time, that's why people often increase their doses of injectable therapy over time, because they have to sort of continue to reach those levels. I think that population may not be, well suited. I think you have an entire patient-naive population, again, the ones that need to go get tested, need to understand the health benefits, they have the symptomatic issues too, and need to be served. Oral's going to do fabulous there for all of those patient-naive uh, people. But I do think, actually, to your question very directly, oral will replace injections as standard of care because of mimicking your natural circadian rhythm. It's not going to replace them totally because not everybody's going to be able to take pills. Some folks just can't take them, right?
Sure.
Or some people can't remember with their regimen, right? So there will be use cases where they don't fit. But in terms of, from a medical perspective or scientific perspective, why we should do this, I think this will be standard of care.
The actual levels, which I understand are not the, they're not the gold mine here. We're trying to go for how do you feel? How do you perform? How are you as a human being rather than the number on that blood panel? But I'm somebody who, when I'm on TRT and I'm doing everything correctly, I ride kind of high. I ride between 950 to 1150. That's my count. Does oral testosterone get one to that level just as efficiently?
So yeah, no, I'm smiling because it's actually, I thought you were going to say like 2000, but no.
No. Everyone thinks that. Like, perfect. That guy's probably yacked.
No.
I've had one test. I came back one time at 1600.
Okay.
And she was like, oh, maybe downplay a little bit, like your way, and I was wired. Like, yeah.
Right. And everybody responds differently. Like that's why it's important to be able to titrate the dose to the individual and see what fits.
Yeah.
But in terms of, so I'll just cite our phase 3 studies for Kaisertrex. And actually most of these were done at a lower dose because the FDA actually makes you start at lower doses and titrate up. Even though in the real world, most people probably start at a higher dose and just carry on, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's a clinician's decision, right? That's obviously not our decision. But even at these doses in the study, the Cmax, right, that level was about 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. So you're right in that range.
Yeah.
And you can hit that consistently every day.
Wow.
I think, and again, if you're doing, it's about when you need it, right? So that's 8 a.m. to, let's call it 8 p.m. After that, you're not really, you sort of need to wind down.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And what is the role, if any? Because you mentioned that oral testosterone does not deplete natural production of testosterone the way that injections do. What is the role, if any, of HCG in relation to oral testosterone?
Right.
Because that's something I run with my injections.
Typically, and again, every clinician is different, right? Often with injectable testosterone, you'll see HCG use and you'll see anastrozole use, right? Some schools obviously do not want to use any anastrozole. Some people actually throw it into every bag.
Oh yeah,
Just depends.
yeah.
Which is I think is the right thing. But those two things are the most common. So actually, again, with Kaisertrex, from what we gather in the real world, there's very little to no use of HCG alongside Kaisertrex. We don't see testicular atrophy, right? We
Really?
have reports of testicular atrophy because, again, your feedback loop to some degree is showing markers that it's on. So
even with the supplement run.
yeah, so even again, so like it's saying, like, here's a good analogy, right? On oral testosterone, you're running a factory, but you decide you're going to send half the workers home, you're going to turn off half the equipment, but you're going to keep half on. You're going to still keep producing. You're going to keep everything humming. With an injectable, you're firing all the workers, turning off all the equipment, closing the doors. You're putting a lock on that.
Oh yeah, no, I noticed testicular atrophy. I didn't start running HCG till probably 6 months after I had started running TRT, and I started because of testicular atrophy.
Right.
And I remember the look on the guy who was prescribing it to me. I went in there, I told him what was happening. He goes, "Yeah, is that a problem for you?" I was like, "Yeah, that's a problem for me. No, I don't want the boys to shrink. What the hell? You didn't think this would be a problem for me?" He's like, "Oh, it's easy. Here, do that.
Take this. Is there another reason to take HCG beyond the testicular atrophy?
No, not for me. For me, it was simply, hey, I'm seeing shrinkage where I don't want to see that, and I have no desire to have that happen to me.
Right.
What's the deal?
I think
Obviously, in fertility,
right. This is a common, right? Again, across the spectrum, younger to older. So I think but you talk about cost. Now, people adding HCG to the regimens, that's a very pricey medication. I think it runs about $300 a month
at least,
right?
and it's because testosterone is what, 45 to 65 a vial for about a month. So it's not, impractical for somebody to make that. But you're right. Yeah.
But then you're adding
HCG.
HCG on top.
And the other irritating thing about HCG is that you usually cannot get it from your primary. They got to send you to like a pharmacy. You got to go to an outside, and even most of the pharmacies don't even rep it anymore. It's been so,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
ridiculous.
So
It
it's
doesn't.
another reason. Yeah, I think it's another reason that's keeping people off therapy, right? They're like, well, if this is going to happen, because people go on and they read a lot of this stuff online, right?
Which is
People
the
get
worst.
forums.
Yeah.
This is the number one source of information probably for most people, and it's just a bunch of guys that are going back and forth, claiming, all knowing.
Yeah. It's gonna kill you.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna have a kid again.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's no. If anybody takes anything away from this, don't consult the internet for your. You need to know where you're going, and I understand the irony of me saying that because they're literally going to see this on the internet.
Right.
But there really needs to be a revision of where people go for information on this stuff because it's kind of the Wild West.
Like,
On
so
Instagram.
we've tried to do the, I mean, through educational forums like this, again, outspeaking. ReThinkTestosterone.com is our disease awareness site. So
Oh, that's cool.
trying to provide a lot.
ReThink Testosterone. That's really smart.
ReThink Testosterone, exactly, right? And I think through this re-education of folks, that's why we think with oral, you can really bring, primary care back into this, right? Primary care right now, if you look at the state of it, right? They got 5-7 minutes with you. Sometimes you don't even see the doctor, you're only seeing the NP.
Yeah.
And, they may not be reviewing your whole blood panel, what's going on. It's not a very in-depth experience. We know that, right? So if you present with testosterone issues, they may or may not test it, but they certainly don't want to talk to you about it, spend time showing you how to inject and managing it, because frankly, there's no money in it. That's the sad part, right?
Yeah.
And the same honestly exists for urology or any other specialty. There really isn't a lot of money in managing testosterone deficiency. What I hope to see is,
Especially if you want to keep costs down and you want people to be able to afford it.
yeah, exactly. So I think if you want to see more people that need therapy get it, right? You need to have an easy way. And these primary care doctors need to understand testosterone better. So I think, again, through education, maybe CMEs, maybe a revisiting, whatever that is, but then having an oral option to say, hey, look, here's a pill, take it. Let me see how you do. Is a world of difference. It's wildly different than saying, all right, hey, here's this injection. Let me show you how to do it. You're going to have to do it a couple times a week. There's no way he's going to do that. They have to be so motivated, right?
Yeah.
But we're trying to help all people.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot of research you guys have done in the R&D. Is that on ReThink? Is that on ReThink?
So ReThink is primarily all of the amazing literature, I think that has happened across the testosterone space, right? So people have been doing really good research in this for, we're talking 30, 40 years, right? Whether it's that diabetes study that I mentioned that's relatively new. The Traverse study, which is, again, you asked me originally why I got into this. It was because of the cardiovascular perceived risk that was blown out of proportion, that doesn't exist. At that time, the FDA said, okay, industry, go do it. The biggest trial that's ever been done on testosterone therapy.
Real quick, expand that. The misunderstanding about cardiovascular, heart disease, and testosterone. What is that? What is it?
So basically in 2014, they thought testosterone causes heart attacks.
Yes, thank you.
That's it. Simple.
Yeah.
And even there were 2 papers that caused this commotion. Both of them extremely flawed, a lot retracted. Actually, FDA themselves pointed out all the reasons why they were flawed, but still went ahead and changed the label. But at that time, they asked the pharmaceutical industry run the largest trial on testosterone therapy in history. And that's called the Traverse. That read out in June of 2023.
Oh,
Relatively new. Yeah, it took that long. And this was hundreds of millions of dollars that again, it was a big ask. But the industry, again, went ahead and did it. And it read out very clear. Testosterone therapy does not cause cardiovascular risk, period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
You're also correct. We heard that. I heard that when I went on it, people warned me exactly that. Like, well, be careful. hypertension, you don't have blood pressure problems now, but you might, and then you might have a heart attack, and then you might die. That's literally what I was warned by people who like were in the know about going on TRT.
Right. Right. Yeah. No. Again, it's unfortunately, we live in this sort of headline-driven world, right? So people read the headline, they assume that's the end all be all. They don't really look under the covers and figure out what's going on. It's unfortunate, but now we have to go out there and correct that. So again, ReThink Traverse study is massive. The diabetes study, we've seen really good research around, again, even prostate cancer. That's also a myth that has been fully blown out of the water.
That was literally the next
Yeah.
subject I was going to bring
Yeah.
up. What about prostate?
Testosterone does not cause prostate cancer. Period. Period. Yeah, it's in the Traverse study too. So they had all the sub sort of analyses done as well, because again, this was the largest study. So they took advantage of it in a good way and did those. Does not cause prostate cancer. Period.
So what is then, in your opinion today, with all the research that's come out, the Traverse study being completed, what are the biggest risks of one going on testosterone?
Honestly, at the right levels, right? You should not be running a lot of risk, right? I think that's the amazing part. There isn't this list because, again, you're not introducing something foreign to your body. Your body understands what to do with testosterone. When it's in your body, it takes it and does what it's supposed to do. This is not foreign. You're replacing something you're deficient in.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's
because it's your fertility is not as in danger as one would have thought. You are not going to have a heart attack. You are not going to have problems with your prostate or cancer. You are not most likely going to have hypertension issues. These are the
big ones.
angels of death that everybody always said.
I'll share this. So our label, and because everybody knows I'm the CEO of Marius. I own Kaiser Tracks. So Kaiser Tracks has all of these things in the label today: prostate cancer, cardiovascular risk, and whatnot. So they're there. So we are actually working with the FDA to change the label based on all of this research,
Which I can only imagine takes a long time.
Takes time, absolutely. And again, frankly, agency is not a huge fan of testosterone therapy. I think a lot of this is going to change. New administration.
I do too.
But the science, going back here, the science is actually really good. This is not just started and small studies and whatnot. Even the prostate cancer bit, there's really good research that looks at incidence rate of prostate cancer and colon cancer being 25% lower on testosterone therapy. And colon cancer is a huge issue that's affecting younger and younger folks, right?
Yeah.
This is skyrocketing. So again, there's a wealth of really good research that has been done. Just all-cause mortality, like not just what testosterone therapy does, but then also what testosterone deficiency does.
Yeah. I'm still digesting the diabetes correlation with low T count. I mean, I did not know that going into this, and I don't think anybody on the receiving end of this is going to be aware of that either. There is, it's not just that the benefits of being on this are better than you thought. The dangers of having low testosterone throughout your mid to adult life are worse than you thought they were.
Absolutely. I think that's really what the conversation needs to focus on now, right? Because we know it's safe. Let people understand, yes, what is the downside of testosterone deficiency? What is the implications? And then what are the benefits, right? Let's talk about the benefits. And if it suits you, you're symptomatic and whatnot, then you need to think about this. But no, I think the downsides are true. They're actually frightening, honestly. When you really look at the research and what it does if you don't have these adequate levels, it's frightening.
Yeah, it is. And it's the big thing. The only thing that I would push back on to my earlier question, what is the quote unquote what is the worst part about being on testosterone is the same problem people have about quote being on anything for the rest of their life. And that is that people don't like the commitment of having to do anything forever. Right. That's the big thing. Someone, one person I asked, I don't recall who, but he asked that question and his answer was, well, what if I can't get my TRT? Now I'm going to become this like weak person without it. So That, I suppose, is
Well,
only
downside.
a downside.
But again, like I was saying, like using the factory example, at least if half the factory was still working, right, maybe you're going to get back to 70-80% capacity. It's an easier path potentially on oral getting back to that.
And even if you aren't, I mean, we're talking quality of life here. Do you want to live your life deficient?
Right.
Just because you don't like the idea that without a supplement, you won't be as optimized as the supplement is making you? You could apply that to anything. I don't want to take a multivitamin because I don't want to need it.
Exercise. I don't want to
Yeah.
eat well.
Yeah.
Like all the things that we.
Because if I don't have access to that healthy food, I'm not going to be as healthy.
Yeah.
Follow that logic and see where that goes. That logic sucks.
Agreed. Agreed. I think these are things that are sort of staples that you know, commit to, right? It goes to your mental and what is your goal, right? If none of this is your goal, then fine. But if, you know, all of these align with what the life is that you're trying to build, then it's part of the routine. It's okay to put in that work. I mean,
Everybody,
I do it, you do it. It's totally fine.
and even I do it, you do it. We're people who are in this space and have a passion for it. And it's obviously part of what defines us. But everybody, even if you are not, I don't care what background you come from, everybody should want to live a healthy, optimized life the best they can. If you don't, I would say you need to see a mental health professional because something's wrong with you. You should want to be the healthiest version of yourself, and this should matter to you.
But that's why it goes back to somewhat of the education, right? Again, like some of the environmental stuff you can't get out of, but like we want to empower people as much as possible so that the entire spectrum understands how important this is. They can advocate for themselves, right? Until it comes full circle. And yes, your doctor is coming in and it's part of standard on your blood panel. Again, Testosterone Project, that's one of the main initiatives. Testosterone testing, standard on the blood panel. You shouldn't have to go in.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So Testosterone Project,
Yeah.
what is that?
Okay, so this is a nonprofit I founded. We actually just got off the ground about a month ago.
Congrats, man. That's awesome.
This is really, again, changing the educational narrative. But we have three main initiatives here, right? So one is testosterone testing standard on the blood panel. This would be sort of mandated from even the U.S. Prevention Task Force, they've mandated a lot of other tests in the past to say, hey, look, these are standard. They should be included. Insurance has to pay for them. Non-negotiables, right? And this is both for male and female. So testosterone testing, the second is a female approved testosterone, right?
Which right now there isn't.
There's no female approved testosterone in the United States.
Silly.
I think actually there's only one in Australia and there's one under approval in the UK. So it's been
My word. I didn't know that either.
widely neglected.
Again, getting back to the poor education. People think women don't need testosterone.
Right. And
That's
actually
crazy.
they produce up to 4 times pre-menopause. They produce about 4 to 5 times amount of testosterone as they do estrogen.
Wow.
So that's more circulating testosterone
See, I didn't know that either.
than a female. Yeah. And so it's crucial. And I think anecdotally, when you talk to females that have been on testosterone therapy, again, game changing. But what's key here is that there's a pathway for it to happen, right? You don't need onerous, trials and whatnot. You need to provide a simple way and a safe way to get this done so that population can also have access. Third one is also pretty big because, again, it changes the landscape for patient populations and providers too. It's descheduling testosterone. Testosterone is, again, we talked about, was scheduled by Congress in 1990. The only pharmaceutical or hormone to have this happen to it. There's no other controlled hormones.
When you say have this happen to it, for those who don't know, a scheduled drug, like a Schedule 1, a Schedule 2, meaning it's considered, it's controlled.
Yeah, it's a controlled substance, right? So you have to jump through extra hoops from a provider perspective, distribution perspective. It's regulated by the DEA.
Yeah.
Right. So again, so if I'm a patient, I'm thinking, man, I'm using a controlled drug.
Yeah.
Wow, that doesn't sound like something I should be using.
Yeah.
It just adds to the stigma. It's a huge part of the stigma.
I don't want to break the law.
Yeah, exactly. Can I travel with this? Can I bring it on the airplane? Are they going to arrest me?
Yeah.
Do I have to carry these are thoughts that go through people's minds, right? So no reason this thing should be scheduled whatsoever, right? Even oral testosterone is even harder to abuse than an injectable. So we are working actively to deschedule this, and I think that's going to change the access and perception massively.
That's amazing. And this is a nonprofit, you say?
Yeah, so this is a nonprofit.
To change the legislation, the understanding of testosterone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's mainly, going to be active in DC. We're supported, it's really what we want it to be, a grassroots patients, uh, effort in that sense, right? We are going out there, we can have 100,000, 200,000 patients say, yeah, we support this. We believe in this. We know the effects, right? So that's really that advocacy that we're calling upon. So yeah, anybody go to the website, sign up. We will be contacting, whether we're doing petitions, we are actually doing meetups in DC, whatever it might be. We have a great advisory board right now, and we're going to be adding there. We're also going to create a patient advisory board with really well-known figures,
Mhm.
right? I think it's actually, I'll give credit to the female side and women's healthcare. So Halle Berry's led this female healthcare movement and has been really active talking about menopause. I think we can do the same thing on the male side.
Mhm.
I won't mention names, but we have a couple in the queue that I think are going to be really well known and help, again,
Yeah.
destigmatize this for lots and lots of people.
Is Allie involved with this at all?
So Allie's made some recommendations for us.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because this, I mean, it's right up her alley. Certainly, anybody in this space should be supporting this, because this this affects every single company that is trying to promote this type of a service. This affects the laws for the people who are considering taking a service like this. That's a big deal, man.
Yep.
That's no, I definitely want to support this. That's cool. You got Dr. Gabriel.
Yeah, Gabrielle's been a great supporter.
Yeah.
I did her podcast.
That's right. I saw you on her podcast. That's great.
So she's been again, great support.
No, I love what you're doing, bro. This was obviously a big part of the reason why I wanted to get you in here and talk about this. I think education's a big missing piece of this puzzle. There's still people who don't understand 230, including me. I learned quite a bit from this conversation. And that goes to show that if somebody like me who's in this space still learns new things about this compound and its uses and the deterioration of the body without it and all that stuff, then there just isn't enough available education.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because
the dialogue and narrative really has to change and then get amplified, right?
Yeah.
That is our goal and mission.
That's amazing. So if somebody wanted to get involved, get in touch with you, get involved with the Testosterone Project, where would you send them?
Yeah. So I think the links, the best are, for me, follow me on Instagram, Metabolic CEO.
Mhm.
And we're
Cool name, by the way. We were talking about that before you came in. That's a really cool name.
I give credit to the team on that one. So I think we quite active here. This is just the start. A lot more information to come between this, ReThink Testosterone from a study perspective, snippets. Actually, we really, on Instagram for ReThink Testosterone, we really distill a lot of the information too. So I think that's
You do.
Yeah, because
Very well.
there's a lot of these studies. It's tough. I understand. Not everybody wants to read, sort of medical studies and whatnot. But, taking some of the bite-sized information is really helpful to understand the impacts. What does this mean? Again, is it relevant during flu season? And what are some, natural tips, right? What do you?
How do you have Raul on? That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
he's great.
yeah.
Dude, he used to train here.
Did he?
Yeah, back in the day. Yeah, he's right up the road. He lives, so he's done some stuff. Yeah, there he is.
Yeah.
Look at that beard. He looks great. He's done some stuff also with my brother's company, Longevity.
Yep.
Who does that?
Yeah, I'm doing some of the podcasts, right? So I think again,
So he goes around.
you need people out there educating and helping through these different mediums, right? So we don't think there's, it's early. I don't think there's a lot of, competition for these companies, right? They should all be out educating, speaking to different people, right?
Mhm.
Because somebody's going to be on the performance side and want to be uber optimized, and they're going to maybe, longevity or whatnot. Somebody's going to be a different patient and they're just more introverted. They're going to have to speak to a different company and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're at inning one, honestly, on the people in this space and the impact that we can have.
I think you just hit the nail directly on the head too with this. I mean, the people who are on, first of all, anybody involved right now in the space testosterone, they're on the fringe. They're already pioneers. Like this is still not a very mainstream thing. It's more popular now than when I started it. And in the last 5 years, it's certainly blown up. But anybody involved in this right now as a company, a real legitimate company who's trying to gain awareness and help optimize people through the use of this stuff, everybody's kind of working toward the same end. And there's not many. So you're right. It's not a competition between companies for this. It's about education and promotion. There are literally billions of people that don't know about this stuff and aren't on it.
Right.
So the market is Immense.
And it's kind of like, again, I think it's really foundational. So, right, I'm heading to, A4M after this, and people talk a lot about longevity, and that's actually why, not on this one, I'm introducing this concept of livable longevity, right? Because there's so much happening, and like things that you're doing here at the facility are amazing, right? But does everybody have access to that every day? Not always, right? So what are some of the core concepts that we can bring in and replicate into the modern lifestyle, right? I really want to, help share that with folks too. So maybe occasionally we can do some of these additional therapies and things like that, but let's just focus on the basics, right? So I think hormone therapy is actually really at that foundational level. It's something that can be introduced and done every day that's going to yield 90% of the benefits, right? I think if we do that as a society,
Mhm.
we look totally different.
I completely agree. I also think it's way more readily available today than it's ever been. It's no longer go to Mexico and get it type of a world we live in. Like you can get access to this
Yeah,
pretty darn
absolutely.
easily.
I mean, again, for us, you can find a provider, people that we've worked with and whatnot to say, okay, look, at least I've heard about this. I want somebody who already has experience and whatnot.
Mhm.
So, do that. I mean, again, there are multiple ways to go out there and, like you say, get um therapy, but again, appropriately, right? Get tested, find out what's going on, and then if appropriate, absolutely.
Mhm. Heck yeah. Well, thank you so much, bro, for coming on.
No,
This
thanks
was
for having me on.
an awesome, awesome episode, awesome chat. Learned a lot.
Appreciate it.
Great.
Yep.
All right,
Good
man.
times.
Cool.
Thanks.
What's up, guys? Hope you enjoyed that episode. If you come into 1% podcast, the Metabolic CEO, man, we had a great talk here. This was a lot of education, a lot of talk about TRT, the actual uses of it, what testosterone has become in the eyes of the public, what its previous understanding is versus where it's going, the incredible work they're doing at the Testosterone Project, the incredible work they're doing as a company to promote and educate with masses around something that has been very, very misappropriated and misunderstood. If you guys enjoyed that, click right here.